When we were kids, fun and pleasure were planned by our parents. Play dates or sports teams, like our parents were always building fun into our daily schedule, most of us. So when we become adults, we're like, why is there no fun? Why is it all adulting? We have to take on that responsibility because otherwise it's never going to happen and your life is going to be taxes and laundry.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Digest This podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Cameron, and today Ali Bonar, the co-owner of Oat Hous Granola Butter, is on the show today, and she shares about her past eating disorder, food fear, and how she broke free and created a food company out of her past struggles. We talk about why binging is so common and the connection between food and emotions, and how so many of us revert to food when we are sad or happy, and how we can revert to other means besides food to cope with our emotions. Food can certainly give us pleasure. However, when food is the only pleasure we have in life, that is when we need to reevaluate ourselves and seek out other means of enjoyment, activities, and hobbies beyond just work. We touch on so many subjects around food freedom, and I hope this episode inspires you to live a life free of fear. Thank you so much, Ali, for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
I like to start my podcasts with rapid fire yes or no questions. So you can only answer yes or no to these, like, how many do I have? Like 5 questions here. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Is food freedom actually more than just food?
Yes.
Interesting. Can being food conscious help with food freedom?
Yes.
Can being food conscious hinder food freedom?
Also, yes.
Does owning a business mean you are automatically rich?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, and last question. And this is not a yes or no, but more of like a one-word answer. Is working from home a blessing or a curse?
Both. Can I say both?
Yeah, you can say both. Okay. Yeah, I feel it. Okay, so if you were one of those people like myself who was always looking for water to be just easier to drink, like I am a person that just doesn't like to drink a lot of water. I don't know why. I've never been a water drinker. And having safe, clean water is, of course, just one more thing to have to worry about. And you don't want to do that. Unfortunately, according to the extensive research done by the EWG, 3 out of 4 homes in America have harmful contaminants in their tap water. Maybe that's why I never liked drinking water as a kid. Like we grew up on tap water and then I just didn't like drinking it. I don't know. Maybe that's just my theory. But more research is coming out that long-term exposure to high concentrations of PFAS can potentially lead to adverse health effects like cancer, endocrine system disruption, and liver toxicity, which is why I'm glad that AquaTrue removes all PFAS. The filters are affordable and long-lasting. No changing filters every 2 to 3 months. AquaTrue's filters last from 6 months to 2 years. I personally got my first AquaTrue back in 2022, and we have only needed to change the filters once, and that was actually quite recently. Just one set of filters from their classic purifier makes the equivalent of 4,500 bottles of water. That's less than 3 cents a bottle. Plus, you'll save the environment from tons of plastic waste. And best of all, the water tastes fantastic, and you don't have to worry about PFAS or other harmful contaminants. It's even portable, making it perfect if you rent or live in a college dorm. I actually had never heard of AquaTrue until I met my boyfriend, now husband, back in early 2022. And he was the one who influenced me to get one because he had done just extensive research on the best water filters out there. Thankfully, he's a nerd just like me, and he introduced me to AquaTrue. And let me tell you, the very first month I got the filter, I noticed clearer skin, and I was also just drinking more water in general because it actually tasted good. I had no idea what pure, clean water could actually taste like until I switched to an AquaTrue filter. And before drinking the AquaTrue water, I was just using the filter from my refrigerator fridge that typically comes and just comes out of your fridge, right? Huge difference from that. Now, it gets even better because AquaTrue comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and even makes for a great gift. So, to all my listeners today, you'll receive 20% off any AquaTrue purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com. That's AQUATRU.com and enter code DIGEST at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to aquatrue.com and use code DIGEST. Every single time I cook eggs in my Instagram stories, my DMs get flooded with questions about the nonstick pan I use to create such perfect eggs. I'm not gatekeeping, I promise. The pans I use are from the company Our Place. I'm sure you've heard of them, but if you haven't, they are a female-founded company that creates non-toxic cookware and bakeware, as well as cutting boards, tableware, and even an air fryer, which comes with a 1-year warranty and 100 days to try it out for yourself and return it if it's not for you. And that goes for all their cookware. Their nonstick pans are made with ceramic, but most importantly, they're made without PFAS, lead, or cadmium. They're also oven safe for up to 450 degrees for all of your favorite stove to oven recipes. So if you're like me and don't want to transfer things, if you're cooking on the top of the stove and then you want to pop it in the oven, they're totally safe to do so. And if you're making an effort to buy non-toxic food and ingredients, but still cooking and baking with toxic materials, it's time to rethink that strategy because all of your good quality food is being prepared in a toxic pan where chemicals are being leached back into your food. I have been obsessed with Our Place, and I know you will be too. But if you're not, you can return it within 100 days. Free shipping and returns are included, so you really have nothing to lose. These make for a great Christmas gift for others and, of course, yourself. And if you want to save some money, you know I got you. Just go to FromOurPlace.com and enter my code DIGEST at checkout to receive 10% off site-wide. That's FromOurPlace.com and use code DIGEST. For anyone that doesn't know who you are, and if you don't know who Ali Bonar is, you probably are living under a rock. But for anyone that doesn't know, why don't you introduce yourself?
Definitely. Oh, well, yeah. Thanks so much for having me and everyone for listening. Yeah, my name's Allie. I am one of the founders of Oat House. But I'm also so much more than that. And that's something that I've been trying to experiment with lately because I'm sure you know, Bethany, just being a business owner yourself, it's so easy to tie like your entire identity and your self-worth into your business because it's your baby. So I think we're almost 7 years in, and I'm at this point now where I am so proud of what we've built, but also have so many other interests and, facets and parts of myself too. So I'm currently living in Cleveland, Ohio, which is never thought I would end up here. I actually love it. I'm originally from San Diego, and now currently living in the Midwest because our facility is here at the moment. And it's just been a really amazing transition. I think growing up in California, I just never expected to live in the middle of the country, but people are super warm and really genuine and authentic. And it's also really affordable to live here, which is super refreshing coming from California. But I struggled with an eating disorder for over a decade, super open about it. Obviously, we can dive in today about that. But a huge part of my recovery process was reintroducing a lot of my fear foods back into my diet. So I struggled mostly with, I would say, exercise addiction and orthorexia, which I just kind of describe as an obsession with eating like perfectly clean all the time in a really unhealthy mentally way. I know a lot of people, love eating clean and it makes them thrive. And I think the biggest difference for me was just it added a lot of stress and fear into my life versus, value add. to my life. And so, yeah, it's a huge reason why I started my company, which I guess I haven't even explained what we do. But we make a product called granola butter, which is the world's first oat based spread. So just think the delicious taste of granola, but in a spreadable form. And we started in my parents' garage. We now are sold at over 5,000 retailers, which, seems like a lot, but we definitely have a long way to go, and it's been a grind to get here. So I'm happy to talk about all the unsexy parts of growing a business. And yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you today and just share my story in hopes that it can help people feel less alone. Because I think that was the hardest part about struggling with food, was just feeling like I was the only one going through it.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely want to dive into a lot of different things that you mentioned. And let's just start because you did say, you did have an eating disorder. And I know the whole reason, why you started Oat House, aka granola butter. And can you elaborate though, like why did you really start this company, and what made you do it?
Yeah, I know it's so random. I think everyone finds themselves in this food space for different reasons. So actually, before this, I was working in tech, very cliche, San Francisco tech scene, and I went to school in the Bay Area, which is why I was there. I went to Berkeley, and ironically, I actually studied nutrition in college. But again, it was sort of from this fear-based place, right? So it was like, maybe I will finally be skinny if I, know everything there is to know about nutrition. And that's like really what drove me. And it was a really unhealthy mindset to be in because obviously, as you know, being in the wellness space, sometimes it's like information overload and it just becomes like, what is even healthy anymore? Like, vegan, paleo, like there's so many different things that work for so many different people. And I think it's just hard to kind of tune out the noise and check in with yourself as to, okay, what actually works with my body, especially on social media, because, as we know, the kind of sensationalist, like, dramatic things are what the algorithm prefers, unfortunately. And so it just feels, yeah, like it's hard to kind of weed through that info. And so I ended up working in tech because I really just didn't know what else to do, honestly. And it paid well. And, it was what looked good on paper. But inside, I was really unhappy and just like unfulfilled. And so I started sharing on Instagram back in like 2016, 2017. And I had no idea what an influencer was, didn't know you could monetize, really just wanted to share, authentically like a virtual diary. And ever since I was little, I had so many journals and blogs, like before influencers were a thing. Like it's been a part of my DNA to share my journey. And selfishly, it's really therapeutic for me. So that's, a big part of why I do it, but then obviously to help other people too. So once I started to share, I think I was sharing things that were a little different than what people were sharing at the time. It was a lot of like, which I think you also were similar. It's like a lot of people are sharing their, filtered like latte and cappuccino photos. And I'm over here like, I just binge ate a jar of peanut butter and here's how I'm feeling. And people were like, whoa, girl, like, there's diaries for that. But I think the people who it resonated with, it really resonated with because people saw this like authentic, almost like a journal entry, honestly. And they were like, wow, I'm going through this exact same thing. So long story short, ended up reaching out for help. This was like end of 2016. And I just was so sick of living in this mental prison that I had created for myself. And I knew there had to be a better way with food and better way with my body. And so a huge part of my recovery process was, as I mentioned before, like reintroducing these fear foods. So for me, peanut butter, almond butter, a lot of these nut butters, I, was terrified of for years because to me, they were super calorically dense. And as you know, like food rules don't really make sense sometimes either. So as I started to add them back in, I just had a hard time digesting them. I think at the time my system was so just in shock of, and fragile of like me not eating many foods. So I was working with a nutritionist and she recommended, why don't you try sunflower seed butter and soy nut butter and some of these nut free options. And I'm not allergic to nuts, so I never had to try those products. And so when I did, I was like, wow, personally, the taste doesn't do it for me. And I can't believe these are the only nut free options. And so I had this, epiphany almost to create a nut free spread. Honestly, at the beginning, it was for myself. But I also saw that oat milk was coming on the scene. Oatly was popping up everywhere. And I was like, if you can make a milk out of oats, you can definitely make a spread out of oats. So that's where the initial idea came from. And it really has just obviously transformed and grown from there. But the whole why is still true to this day, which is making food fun. Food was so stressful for me for so many years. It was so rigid. It was so just wrapped in, anxiety. And so I think with our product, it's not kale. It's not like the healthiest product in the world, but it brings you joy. Hopefully you connect with your kids when you're eating it. It brings you pleasure. It's just fun. And it's like a little treat at the end of the day. So that's, yeah, a big reason why we do what we do.
Yeah, your product is definitely different and different than any others that I've seen because who can spread oatmeal on basically a piece of toast or an apple or anything, right? So that was super cool. And I've seen other people try and recreate your product and they've failed or maybe not have been so successful, which was something I wanted to even ask you maybe a little later, but in regards to like a follow-up question about your eating disorder and your history, like obviously you're doing so much better now and I feel like from what I see on the outside, like you definitely have food freedom and you are just embracing being a business owner and really just eating intuitively. And I think that is something that a lot of people really strive for is to really eat intuitively. And how did you how did you get to that point now? Like obviously you said you created your business from actually your fear foods, really. Did you ever feel like like you quote feared oats? Because I feel like that is something that maybe a lot of people struggle with. I know people actually can't have it for digestive issues, but if you don't have any kind of issue digesting them, was that something that you kind of steered away from? And if you did, why did you just, choose oats? I know. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think intuitive eating, like you said, it's something that so many people strive for, and it's sort of this like nebulous, like what does that mean? And I think we're all so different and unique and individual, and so you really have to find what works best for you. Like some people are, more kind of like black and white, like all or nothing type people. Some people are more moderators. And what I've learned about myself, I can only speak to my experience, and also, I'm not a dietitian or anything, so this isn't like nutrition or medical advice, but for me, I really realized I love little bits of everything. Like, I mean, I have diagnosed ADHD, like it's so, on brand for me, but like a charcuterie or like a cheese board is my dream. It's like, oh, I get to try a little bit of everything or, tapas or something like that. And so when I was struggling with food, by restricting whole food groups, like your willpower only lasts for so long, right? So it's like, I would find myself binging so often because not allowing myself those things almost put them on a pedestal. So yeah, like say oats, for example. I was also terrified of carbs. So I was afraid of everything at the time. But it's like, I would restrict and say like eat very low carb, which works for some people. But again, for me, it was just like too much restriction. And so then, at the end of the day, I'm tired. I'm maybe hormonal PMSing, just like my willpower is out the window. And I let myself have, say, like one cookie or, something with carbs in it. And then it's that mentality of like, oh, you screwed it all up. Like you fell off the wagon. You might as well just eat the rest of the box and start over fresh tomorrow. And I think a lot of people kind of on the wagon, off the wagon mentality, like struggle with that, like, that whole mindset. And so what I realized for myself was actually when I allow myself to eat whatever the hell I want, it loses that sexiness. It's like the bad boy that like you really want and he's like smoking cigarettes and riding his motorcycle and your parents are like you can't date him. And so they say that and you're like but that makes me want him more. And then as soon as you learn that he loves you back, you're like oh well you're not super interesting to me. It's like the honeymoon phase, and so I think once, of course, you go through that phase where once I let myself have everything, I was eating everything under the sun. And then you're like, I'm an adult. I can have ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner if I want. and I don't want it because it doesn't make me feel good. So I think it's just learning that about yourself. But I will say it's definitely a journey. And I struggled with food for so long that it was honestly unreasonable for me to expect 100% recovery in a couple months, which is what as humans we are wired to want, that sort of instant gratification. Thank you, Amazon, for training our brains that way. But it took years and it's still a process. There's still times where, running a business is stressful, as you know, and there are times where I find myself emotionally eating and I'm like, why am I doing this? But breaking those patterns, not continuing those cycles, like that's something that recovery has given me the tools to do, and realizing like it doesn't serve me when I binge eat anymore. And I haven't, binge eaten in a long time because of that reason. So it's finding different coping mechanisms. You're still going to have these big emotions. That's another thing I'd love to talk about at some point in our conversation is like what people don't realize with healing your relationship with food is once you do heal it, like then you need to learn how to deal with these emotions that come up because in the past you've used either restricting or binging on food. So that was a whole nother second part of my recovery process that I had to go through.
Yeah, well, and I think you're so right too, is that once you allow yourself to enjoy these foods not as a special treat, but like even on the daily, it loses its specialness. And I mean for me, my husband laughs at me because I have probably like half a cup of chocolate every single day. And a lot of it is in the morning like with my coffee. And then the rest of the day, like, I don't really crave anything necessarily. It's just like whatever. But chocolate like doesn't have that thing that maybe a lot of people want, like love about chocolate. And so my point is, you're right. If you allow yourself to just eat, then it's not special anymore and you're not going to want the entire bag of cookies because you have it every day and it's kind of boring now, you know?
Exactly. No, you're so right. It's like as if you were restricting chocolate all day, and then at the end of the day you ate like a whole bag of Snickers, like I could see how that would happen. But since it's like, yeah, you have it in the morning, it's no big deal. Yeah, you're not feeling like white knuckling it. So
Yeah. And also like I do want to talk about emotions because I feel like there's a difference between definitely like eating emotionally and then also just like feeling bad about yourself if you eat something that maybe, you ate too much of or you just don't feel good about eating it. And I'll give you an example. And I think you can agree, once you get older and just have more experience, unfortunately, you just learn from your past versus just being smart and not doing it. But
yeah.
it I think it is about mindset. And so like the other day, I bought this yogurt and it was like full fat cream top. So there's like a thing of cream at the top of the yogurt. And I ate all the cream at the top and it was so good. And I didn't like feel bad about it. I actually joked about it with my husband. I was like, oh my gosh, I just like ate all the cream. And it wasn't like this guilt. It was like more of a joke, like funny thing, like, I can't believe I ate all the cream, like whatever, like go on with my day. And I think if we make that switch and not feeling guilty about it and just like whatever, laugh about it, I think we can just kind of feel better about everything, about ourselves. So yeah.
100%. Yeah. And I think, like you were saying too, it's like learning from times where maybe you didn't feel 100%. Like, say, I mean, I obviously don't know. Sometimes I eat cream and I'm like, yeah, I feel great. Let's keep it going. But, like, say, yeah, if you were afterwards, like, oh, my stomach, maybe that was a little too much. It's like, I think in the past, having that like shame and guilt is just not productive. Right. And I think kind of like, you said bringing the joy, bringing the levity to it. And I think, yeah, bringing a little more just like lightness to eating because like food is, it's not a big deal, at the end of the day, it should be something that like brings us joy. And so, yeah, I think like we complicate things so much by adding all of these layered emotions onto it, which is normal, but yeah, it doesn't have to be that way.
So for anyone that may be emotionally eating, And how do you deal with those emotions after the fact? Like, say, okay, I've healed my relationship with food, but I still have these emotions. Like, now what?
Mm.
Like, how do I deal with them?
Yeah, such a great question. I mean, I would say therapy is like my number one hack. Um, because I grew up in a family just context where both my parents were so happy go lucky, love that for them. I am a very deeply emotional person. Like I have high highs, I have low lows, and I just never was taught how to handle my negative emotions. So, I think my parents were always like, "Oh, cheer up, like let's go get an ice cream." Like so tying food to happiness, and so that's inevitably why I ended up binge eating a lot because I learned that at an early age, like, okay, when you're sad you eat and that makes you happy. And I think a lot of people have that experience, and over time what I realized is it's only a band-aid, and it's only, yeah, sure, it makes you feel happy for a little, but at the end of the day, you're not actually like getting to the root of why you're feeling sad. Or it sometimes you don't even have to like logically figure out the why. It's just feeling the feelings. And I think I was terrified. A lot of us are so scared of emotions because they can feel scary, but the only way out is through. And so, yeah, just a big part of my process was learning to feel my feelings. And I was someone, I would say, before my recovery, I never cried. I was like this bubbly, happy go lucky girl, never cried, especially in public. And now, like, oh, I'm crying at commercials. It feels like I'm always crying, but it's healthy. It feels like I'm processing, I'm releasing. And I think a lot of us like hold our emotions in so tightly, especially a lot of men. And it's like a beach ball. Like you push it underwater, it's inevitably gonna come up and slap you in the face. You can't keep it underwater forever. So I think, yeah, just learning to process. And for me, yeah, therapy was a huge tool because it can feel overwhelming of like, okay, so I need to feel my feelings. How do I do that? So I think working with a professional can really help if you were clueless like I was.
I am going to cut to the chase and tell you that Peak Tea's Radiant Skin Duo is on special right now. Just laying it out there because, as most of you know, I am a huge fan of Peak Life Tea's crystals and all of their matcha black teas and tropical powder teas. I drink them on the regular. So I feel like I'm just doing an injustice if I didn't tell you about this amazing sale right now. I seriously love all their tea crystals and the fact that they do not use any toxic tea bags, which can contaminate your tea and your drink in general just by having the chemicals that are in the bags leach into what you're consuming. I'm not sure if you guys know this, but a lot of tea bags, if not all, are just toxic. But Peak Life, all their products are tea bag free and their products are certified organic. They are triple toxin screened for heavy metals, pesticides, and mold. And I don't know if you knew this either, but a lot of tea companies are now adding natural flavors to their teas. And we all know from my viral Instagram video showing how natural flavors aren't actually natural at all. They're actually made in a lab and are added to products to make you more addicted to that product you're consuming. Natural flavors, toxins, and chemicals are hijacking our taste buds and disrupting our endocrine system and gut health. So again, that's why I love Peak Tea because they don't use any of that and they do rigorous testing to make sure all their teas are free from toxins and mold. And if you're looking for a coffee alternative, Peak has a blend called Chaga Energy Elixir, which is 100% caffeine free, yet still gives you energy without the jitters and can even provide a calmness at the same time. But if you're looking for a deal, check out their website because they are always having specials. And so I really encourage you to go check out what's on sale right now, especially their Radiant Skin Duo. And if you're not sure if you're going to like any of their teas, they have a free return policy within 30 days. So if you try something and you're not happy with it, just send it back like what you didn't use and they'll just give you a refund. I mean, I just love that about this company that they just want you to be happy and satisfied. So if you go to peaklife.com/digest, you can receive up to 15% off plus up to 2 free gifts. Again, that's PIQUELIFE.com/digest. Peaklife.com/digest. candida.com/digest. So I recently did a candida cleanse on my Instagram. And if you follow me there, then you probably remember that. And one of the things I made sure I took every night was magnesium. Now, I often take magnesium on a regular basis anyways, but I admit that sometimes and some weeks I am not consistent. However, it came to my attention that magnesium is actually required to eliminate Candida albicans. And without it, your body cannot actually break that yeast down and allow your body to eliminate it. Once I learned that from a study I read in the NIH, I will now never go a night without my magnesium pills. And the brand I take is from Bioptimizers, which is their magnesium breakthrough. My husband and I have actually been taking it for quite a while, so it was already in our cupboard. But again, now that I know the importance magnesium has in eliminating Candida albicans from the body, I never want to stop it. Not only is magnesium required to eliminate yeast from the body, but magnesium is required for over 600 different biochemical reactions in the body, including to help reduce PMS cramps and related symptoms, migraines, muscle aches, anxiety, insomnia, and even constipation. The reason I chose Magnesium Breakthrough over the other brands is that it contains all 7 forms of the different types of magnesium, whereas other brands only provide 2 to 3 types. So you're not getting the full spectrum benefits. Another thing I really appreciate about Magnesium Breakthrough is that they don't add any fillers, flavors, silicone dioxide, or gums, which are commonly added to supplements and powders these days. It is also soy-free, gluten-free, vegan, and the best part is Bioptimizers has a 365-day money-back guarantee. That's an entire year. You can try this product, and if you're not satisfied, you'll get your money back. So if you want to get the full spectrum benefits of magnesium, go to bioptimizers.com/digest and use code DIGEST at checkout to save 10%. In addition to the discount you get by using my code, you can get up to 2 travel-sized bottles of Magnesium Breakthrough for free. So again, just go to bioptimizers.com/digest and use code DIGEST. That's bioptimizers.com/digest and use code DIGEST. No, definitely therapy, reaching out for help if, there's so many different options, whether it's in person or online, depending on anyone's severity. Um, and you're right. Like a lot of people, when they're sad, they eat. And then I feel like food it's everywhere because not just when you're sad you eat, but when you're happy you eat. Like at celebrations, and you're celebrating something you eat. And it's like every emotion kind of is tied into food and food is tied into emotion. So what are some tips that you could give someone where, let's say instead of going to food when you're sad, what else can you do? And then instead of going to food when you're happy, what else can you do?
Yeah. I mean, I want to be clear that food is emotional, right? So, like, I think for me, I don't think the goal is ever to remove all the emotion out of food because at the end of the day, like, it's a huge part of why we eat. It's cultural, it's emotional. I think the issue, at least for me, was that it was my everything in terms of emotional regulation, right? So it was like it was the answer to every emotion I was feeling, and it just wasn't serving me. For some people, maybe it's fine, but I think my answer to that is more just diversifying your emotional regulation tools. So, like, one thing that really helped me with binge eating was adding more pleasure to my day, which I know is one of the reasons, you reached out to chat about this because like during the day I was working in tech, I was girl bossing so hard and I just like had zero pleasure in my day, right? It was all like adulting, work, work, work. So naturally at the end of the day, my body is like, my brain actually is like, where's the dopamine? Like, where can we get this from? Quick hit from food. So now, my day just looks different. Like I do things that spark joy, and pleasure doesn't have to be just sexual, like it can be, but there's so many little things that bring you pleasure. Like just being, mindful and like really enjoying your morning coffee and like just being present for a split second. Cause I know there's distractions everywhere in our lives, but like really tuning in, going for a walk, without your phone and just like smelling in the nature. And, I think it's different for everyone, taking up dance classes, like whatever it means to you. But I think just incorporating a little bit more of that pleasure in your day to day. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be time consuming. Some people love to draw, etc. So that was huge for me. And I think once I started incorporating more pleasure, I found the urge to binge was just so much less because it almost felt, before it felt primal. It felt like my brain was just looking for any sort of source of dopamine. And once I started to give it a little bit of that with other things, then it just wasn't as hungry, for food in that way. But I will say another thing that really helps me with like the emotional eating, because for me, once I kind of logically realized, like, okay, food can't be my everything, it was still habitual for me to turn to food in moments of stress, boredom, happiness, like any emotion. So I think journaling was a big piece for me. And I just love to like talk to my Instagram stories. Like I'm kind of like a video diary girly. But maybe for someone else, it's writing or, not sharing it on social, but just like taking videos for themselves. But getting your emotions and thoughts like out of your head, because it can feel big and scary up here, either like into words on, a video camera or like onto paper. It gives you that separation. So then you can look at like, here's how I'm feeling. And it feels less scary. So that was one big thing. And realizing that like every time I binge ate or emotionally ate past the point of fullness, I didn't feel good. And so like writing that out or, again, like to your video, talking about like, here's how I'm feeling after I binge ate. So then in those moments where I was feeling like really activated and wanting to do that, kind of going back and watching, past videos of me being like, oh, I'm so mad at myself. Like I feel terrible. But I will say like, yeah, kind of what I mentioned in the beginning, like to be clear, I still emotionally eat, but it serves me. It's for me, emotional eating is like a positive thing. It's like, your partner just got a promotion. Yes, like let's go pop champagne, let's go to dinner, let's connect over this beautiful meal. But it's not harming me in the way that it did before, if that makes sense, where, I would feel shitty about myself. Physically, I would feel ill. So, yeah, it's just finding that balance of what works for you.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you mean. And I think too, so many of us are lacking fun and pleasure. And I think because of that, many of us do just turn to food because, like you said, it's a easy, quick fix, adrenaline rush that can easily boost endorphins. And we don't need anyone around us to release those endorphins. Like we could just do it ourselves, like just with quick food. But as you said, like it doesn't really give you that joy anymore. And you're like, okay, well, why am I eating like past the point of hunger? And I'm like, my stomach's actually hurting now. Like, is this still giving me endorphins?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Mhm. I think, yeah, one last thing that I'll mention too that really helped me in my process that just came to me was I really channeled, the Italians, Spanish people, French people. Like if anyone's ever been to Europe in that region, it feels like when you visit, like food is so central to a lot of what they do and it's so emotional and it's part of their daily life, but it's like you said, it brings its value add. And it's sort of that like breezy relationship with food where you can love it. You can be a foodie. Cause that was like one thing that I really struggled with when I was in recovery was like, well, I love food. Like, am I going to have to let go of that? Am I going to have to, become one of those like tech bros that just like drink Soylent all day? Like, no, like I want to really, I still love the eating experience. And I think it's, again, like it's, what's so hard about this process is it's not black and white. There's so much gray that you need to navigate individually for yourself. But yeah, for me, it was realizing like, a really positive experience is when I'm super intentional, super mindful while I'm eating. I'm present with my friends. I'm enjoying every bite. And I'm realizing that if I just continue to eat, things aren't going to get better, right? That dopamine isn't going to continue to go up. It's like when people, alcohol, I know it's a very touchy subject, but and a lot of people struggle with alcoholism, but it's like I remember in college it's like, okay, I'm feeling so good after one cocktail, like I'm going to have 10 more, and then you're like throwing up, outside your house, and you're like, no, actually, more isn't always better. So yeah, it's just like almost reparenting yourself too. I think a lot of times, like, people have this aversion to discipline, especially within the realm of food freedom, thinking that like I need to let myself have donuts and cake all day, but really having a little bit of gentle parenting and boundaries, and kind of reparenting yourself of like, hey, if you have 5 slices of cake, like, are you going to actually feel great? Is that going to be serving you?
Yeah. And why do you think that so many of us have lost like putting our own pleasure as a priority? Like, why do we not do that anymore?
I just don't think we live in a society that values that, right? It's like America, like we value capitalism, we value girl bossing, we value power, making money, like, and that's why I mentioned Europe, and especially those countries like Italy, France. Like, to me, it feels like they really value having free time, spending time with loved ones. Like, that is just what there's more emphasis on. And so you really are going against the grain if you're listening to this and you're living in America. Like, what is valued is being a cog in a wheel and working really hard and grinding and rising up the ranks. And um, I think, and being productive. And I think that's great, but it's not everything. And that's coming from someone who has, grinded her ass off, grown her business, reached a lot of these milestones, and realized, like, actually, this doesn't bring me happiness, like getting into Target, going on Shark Tank, all these things that I thought were going to bring me happiness, they didn't. And what really brings me happiness is just having, time to myself, being present, spending quality time with loved ones, like those simple things that our society just doesn't value. So you have to make the time. And one last thing I'll say is, when we were kids, fun and pleasure were planned by our parents, like play dates or sports teams. Like, our parents were always building fun into our daily schedule, most of us. So when we become adults, we're like, why is there no fun? Why is it all adulting? And it's because we have to take on that responsibility. We have to plan fun for ourselves, which you can think of as like, oh, another thing, another fucking thing I need to add to my to do list. But really, like, once you prioritize it, it's so worth it, because otherwise it's never going to happen. And your life is going to be taxes and laundry, 24/7.
Such a good point, Allie, because as adults, no one else is making us have fun. No one else is putting play dates on our schedules or putting us into sports. Like, we're the ones that have to do it. And I think that's a huge part. And I think too, like you had mentioned, we're just grinding all the time. And that is what society thinks is like, that's what you are put on a pedestal if you do, right? I think we're looked down upon if we go and just have fun and just be goofy. And you're like, well, you're not being productive, and you almost feel bad about yourself. I've done it. I'm guilty of it. I'm like, I go out and have a good time. And I'm like, man, I didn't get anything, like any work done today. And I feel bad about it. It's definitely a delicate balance.
It is, yeah. I think, like, for me, what it's looked like, because I still love setting goals and like achieving things, like that does make me feel good. But I think not shaming myself and not tying my value to productivity. So, like, I feel like in the past, I would say, if I was, going for a walk, then I would have to be listening to some like self help podcast. And it's like, if it wasn't productive, it wasn't worth my time. And that is just not a great way to live for me personally. So now it's like doing things just for the sake of doing them because they make you happy, doing them because they're fun, they spark joy. I'm always searching for that now. And it really has made a huge difference in my mental health and my life.
Yeah. And to that point, I think that, quote, doing nothing, it can still be productive. Maybe not, for work or money making, but it's productive for your own health.
100%. No, it is, because otherwise you're going to be burned out. You're not going to be productive because you're going to be so exhausted. So yeah, it's super important. I agree.
All right, you guys. So I have been making these special gummies and I have to give you the recipe. So get a pen and write this down. These gummies are so addicting, and all you need are three main ingredients. They're not only good for the gut, but they can also help aid in hair growth, immune function, skin health, and they taste like a creamy ice cream pop you literally can just pop in your mouth. And all this is from the colostrum I add. So if you haven't guessed by now, these are creamy colostrum milk gummies that literally are like a pillow in your mouth. You can add a touch of honey if you want, or keep them 100% sugar-free for all my keto and low-carb friends. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about Armor Colostrum over and over by now, and for good reason. It's been clinically shown to help guard against inflammation and everyday toxins and pollutants. Colostrum intake has also been linked to fewer respiratory tract and GI infections in children and adults. In fact, there are over 5,000 published studies documenting the benefits of colostrum and its ability to optimize health from when we are born all the way through our elder years. But Armor Colostrum is different from others on the market, and it's something I started taking back in March 2023, long before all the hype. They use a proprietary cold chain biopotent technology that distills over 200 functional nutrients, guaranteeing the highest bioactive integrity and bioavailability. Another thing I personally love about this company is that they only use the excess colostrum from grass-fed, pasture-raised, happy cows that are no longer needing it to supply their young. So you know you are not taking away from animals that need it. Only the surplus colostrum is used, and Armra makes sure they are getting only the best from healthy USA cows from family farms. Okay, so here's the creamy colostrum gummy recipe. Just get 2 tablespoons of grass-fed gelatin, 1 cup of your milk of choice, dairy or non-dairy, 1 tablespoon of honey, which is optional, and 1 tablespoon of Armra Colostrum's unflavored grass-fed colostrum. And you can save 20% if you use code DIGEST at checkout on their website. It's tryarmra.com. Again, that's code DIGEST, and that will save you 20%. So what you're going to do with the ingredients is first you're going to pour the milk into a small saucepan, sprinkle the gelatin over the top and allow it to bloom for 5 minutes. If you're using honey, you're going to add that now, and then you're also going to add Armra Colostrum to the pan. You're going to bring it to a medium heat while whisking. Just be sure not to boil it, just a medium heat. Now, once the milk is slightly warmed and everything is dissolved, just remove the pan from the heat and pour into any mold of choice or a glass dish. Then place the dish or the molds into the fridge for at least 2 hours or until set. Once set, just pop the gummies out into an airtight container, and then you're just going to return it to the fridge to store it. If you are using one large dish, then you can cut them into squares or whatever shape you prefer. If you haven't tried Armor Colostrum by now, here's your chance. You can save 20%. Just go to tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST to receive a special discount for my podcast listeners. That's tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST. Again, that's tryarmra.com and use code DIGEST at checkout. Real quick, any tips for those that have lost joy in their life and looking to reignite that fire? Like, what if someone's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I want to do stuff out of work, but I have no idea what I'm even interested in. Like, I don't even know what I'm interested in. I don't know where to start.
100%. That is so common. And I felt the exact same way where I'm like, oh my gosh, what are my hobbies? Like, if I were to get into a job interview right now and they'd be like, oh, what do you do for fun? I'd be like, let me get back to you on that.
Like,
Like, I have no
I
idea.
work.
Yeah, I'm like, work out. Like, that's also still working. So yes, it's not a dumb question. Like, for anyone who's like, oh, I'm almost embarrassed to ask this. I would say number one, what helped me was looking back to your childhood, even asking your parents if, they're still alive or, you have a relationship with them. Like, what did I love to do for fun when I was little? What are some things that if, say, you had all the money in the world and like money was no object and you just had like a 24-hour span, what's the first thing that comes into your head of like, oh, I would do that? Just things that I think deep down you enjoy doing. And if you can't think of anything, just try things like go to a salsa dancing class, go, join a intramural like sports league, start painting. And I think for me, like I've started and picked up a lot of these hobbies along the way. For me, I love rollerblading. It's just exhilarating. It's fun. It gets my heart pumping. Like I just feel so like I'm flying, like the wind coming through my hair. It makes me feel like a little kid again. Another one that I've been really loving lately is going to those like trampoline parks. So I think it's like 20 or $30. You go and it's like you're surrounded by children. And then it's like me. But it's so fun because it's like when I was little, we had a trampoline in our backyard, my brother and I. And like, I'm not super adventurous with like the backflips and stuff, but just doing things that like make you feel like a kid again, I think is super, super important and underrated. So yeah, I would just start making a list and just don't be afraid to try things and not like them because there's been plenty of things that I've done, and it's just process of elimination, it's trial and error. You don't have to be perfect at it. I think as adults we're afraid to like fail or make mistakes, but just really channel your inner 7-year-old.
Yeah, and those trampoline parks, that's actually really good for your lymphatic system. So,
Yeah.
you can look
True.
into
Yeah.
that.
No.
And I remember too, like they don't even have them anymore, maybe, but like the roller rinks, like as a
Mhm.
kid back in the 80s and 90s, and they would put like the lights on, like that would be a fun outing. I don't even think they don't have that anymore. And I feel like so many of us now, especially since COVID, we're all homebodies. Like a lot of us
Mm,
now even work from home because of just, the pandemic. And now people are just like, oh, well, this is now life. And I feel like a lot of people prefer that. They want to be
mm,
home and they don't want to go out and socialize. And with social media, it's just so easy not to go out, but still, quote, be connected.
mhm. Yeah. And it is, look, like I am an introvert, I know I seem extroverted and I can turn it on and be outgoing, but I really recharge being alone. So I resonate with this a ton. And anyone else who is a home, like I'm a home buddy. I love being home. I love working from home. If it were up to me, I would never leave the house. But I think every time, like I just moved to Cleveland a year ago. I had no friends here. I'd never been here before. I didn't know a single soul and obviously came for work. And it's the best thing for the business right now. But would I choose moving to Cleveland? No. And I knew that we were in Philly before this. I had a hard time making friends there. Community is everything. Like it, especially for women, I think like having female friendships, it's something about like the female bond, at least for me, that is so soul nourishing. I love Eric, my fiance. We've been together for 10 years, but like he can't fill all of my buckets, like not like, the girlfriend, girlhood bucket. And that for me is so important. So that I made a huge priority when I moved here of like putting myself out there, making friends, which number one is really hard as an adult, especially if like you don't work in a big company where you're like constantly meeting coworkers. So I started just like, it was almost like dating, at a workout class, if I started chatting with someone and I liked them, I'd be like, hey, do you want to grab coffee after this? And it's uncomfortable. And I had anxiety, like social anxiety of like, what if they reject me? What if they don't want to go? And I've made my best friends that way. And turns out a lot of people are lonely too, even if they're from a certain area and they're looking for connection. Like everyone is looking for connection, but I think we're all afraid to kind of like put your first little feelers out there. So I think if you just like break that wall and you maybe, put yourself out there, people are more often than not going to appreciate it and reciprocate. Um, and there's never been a time, like there's so many times where I've had plans, like at the end of, a work day and I'm tired. I'm like, oh, I don't want to go, but I never regret going. It's like, there's been so many times where I canceled and then I'm like, oh, I look at the photos later. I'm like, oh, I should have gone. But I think like when you're actually there and you're with people that bring you energy, that's another thing as I've gotten older is like realizing who is an energy giver and who's an energy sucker. And it's okay to make your circle small and surround yourself with people that expand you and light you up. But it's just knowing like what types of people do that, because you're going to be more likely to be social and hang out with people if you're surrounding yourself with people that obviously you like to hang out with.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think you're right. Like 9 times out of 10, if you go and ask someone, hey, you want to get coffee? Most likely they're looking for a friend too. 9 times out of 10. Like they are wanting to socialize too. So
Hmm.
I think just need to break that barrier. And, the great thing about being an adult is that you can go to a party and you can leave. You're not
Yeah.
stuck waiting for your parents to take you home. So, you know what? Tell yourself, hey, I am going to go to this party and I'm going to stay for 10 minutes. You just say, I'm just going to go for 10 minutes. Most likely, you're probably going to stay longer because you're having a good time. And hey, what? Out of for whatever reason, you're there for 10 minutes and you hate it. Guess what? You can leave because you're an adult.
Totally. And you know what else I've been really loving lately? So I grew up with two parents. They were just chatty Cathys. I hated it. I was so embarrassed. They would talk to everyone and anyone. The barista at Starbucks, like literally everyone. And now I'm becoming my parents' classic. But like even these, they call them like micro connections. And it's like, yeah, maybe you don't have time to like, schedule a full on play date or go to a party. But like instead of looking at your phone when you're standing in line for coffee, like chat with the person behind you, and I think it's like people, same thing, people are so looking and thirsty for that. But because we have our phones, we're like in our own world. We don't look approachable, so people don't come up to us. And then we're, preoccupied with whatever's going on social media. So we don't make the effort to reach out. But I don't know. I just think like when you make those little micro connections, like it makes me so much happier throughout my day, I've noticed.
That's such a good point. I'm going to start doing that too, because I'm definitely guilty of just like if I'm standing in line, checking my emails, like trying to like quote be productive, right? And you're right. We definitely have lost that connection of just like even being in a stranger's circle. So you did mention Eric, and he is your fiance and also business partner. You've been together for 10 years, and you guys just seem like such a great couple. You guys are getting married soon. Of what I heard, you were supposed to get married and then something
Yeah.
switched.
Yeah, our venue canceled on us. It's a long story. We don't need to go into it, but we are getting married, yeah, next July. So, 2025.
Okay. And so because you guys have been together for so long, was he in the midst of your eating disorder, or was that kind of like cured by the time you guys met?
Oh yeah. No, Eric has seen me through so many phases of my life. Yeah, no, I was definitely in the thick of it. Yeah, we've been together for so long that, he's really seen so many different phases of Allie. And I'm so grateful for that. But at the same time, it's been really interesting. And I'm sure, this, having such a great partner, like I think he's been there for me in the moments that I needed him. And I so appreciate that. But now I'm at this point where like almost once you have to like refigure out your dynamic, because I feel like I've just changed so much. Like when him and I met, we were 20, 21, and now we're 31. Like it's just such a different place of our lives, and we have a business together. And so yeah, we're doing great. I'm a huge proponent. We just had a session last night. We do couples therapy. So we picked it up, yeah, a couple like months ago when we found out that our wedding was canceled, and we had all this like suddenly all this headspace and free time. So we're like, well, we might as well, instead of planning a wedding, like work on our relationship, which is more important. And it's been amazing, because I think sometimes, especially 10 years in, you're just in like the same patterns, and you argue about the same things, and then you work it out. But like having a third party that's like objective and, can point out certain things and patterns, it's been really incredible. So highly recommend for anyone, even if you don't feel like you're in crisis mode. Like I felt like we had a great relationship, but I'm like, how much better can it be? And it's been really nice.
Yeah, I love that. Couples therapy, even if you don't feel like, oh my gosh, our relationship's on the rocks. I mean, I don't feel like anyone could not benefit from it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's really cool because this is the therapist that I actually worked with personally for a long time. And so now she knows me very well. And so she'll ask, like, she almost has this like wheel, right? So she'll ask, like, okay, how do you guys want to discipline your children, your future children? And it's like just these questions that Eric and I, when we're tired at the end of the day, we're not asking each other these questions, and especially when you've been with someone for so long, you feel like you know everything about them. And so I think it's really nice to just like unlock these little new parts of your partner that you just, yeah, didn't know existed.
Yeah, well, and especially too because you do work together, I feel like it could be I don't know what the word is, like mundane, I guess, because like you see him all day, then you see him at night.
For sure.
So how do you keep the spark alive when you've been working with your soon to be husband all day?
Oh my gosh. No, it's such a great question. And I will say it's definitely not for everyone. Like I have past partners that I'm thinking of where I'm like, oh my God, I could never have worked with them. But I think for me, like the benefit for us is that we're building something together. It's like our baby, and I can't imagine not growing this business with Eric. Like, I can't imagine him kind of working a 9 to 5 and I'm telling him about like all this shit that's going on and he just can't understand. So I will say, like, it's amazing, but it also is really tough. And I think the hardest part for us is switching out of work mode into like, you are my romantic life partner. And I think what has really worked well for us is like leaving work at work. So during the pandemic, it was tough because like everyone was working from home and the lines were blurred. But, now we're at a point where it's like, if it's 11 p.m. and, he'll ask me, hey, can I ask you a work question? And I have the authority to say no. And oftentimes I'm like, no, like it's not, we make granola butter. It's not like brain surgery. It's not an emergency. Like ask me tomorrow, So I think setting those strong boundaries and then doing things obviously outside of work. Like we both love music festivals. We travel a ton. We just love to spend time together and have fun together. So like prioritizing that play, not just with yourself, but like also with your partner.
Yeah. Do you find that you randomly just talk about work? Like just as like the conversation goes, like if you're eating dinner and be like blah 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 blah, or like it doesn't even have to be like a want want like this is like what happened at
Yeah.
work. It could be like more like oh this would be a cool like flavor or something like I don't know.
Oh, for sure. I think like, and that's what's so amazing is like we're both so passionate about what we're building that it's hard for us to not talk about work sometimes because we'll go out on like a date night and we'll sit down at dinner. We're like, okay, no work talk, and then it's like crickets, silence. We're like, what do we talk about? So we both love golfing. Like we've tried to start to pick up hobbies that are not work that like they're things we do together. Obviously, traveling. You're experiencing these new things together that are not just work, but it's still exciting for us to talk about those things. And obviously, it's a shared life experience, building this company together. So I don't think we necessarily, if like someone talks about work, the other person's not like, hey, the work police. But I think it's just knowing your partner too. And like sometimes if you're, say I'm really tired, he can tell like he's not going to bring it up, type of thing. So it's just like in
Mhm.
reading your partner's emotions too.
Sure, for sure. Um, okay, now here's an interesting question. So, how do you feel about anti-diet culture? Because I feel like
Mm,
that's just as unhealthy as diet culture when they say like eat whatever you want or like it's okay to be like morbidly obese and eat ice, you know what I mean? And just like not really actually care for your health. Like how do you feel about the other end of the spectrum?
Yeah, anti-diet. So I think for me, I definitely fell into it's like when you struggle with food for so long, you obviously want to kind of swing the other direction and like explore that whole world. And I'm sure, it may work for some people. For me, I think it just, I feel best when I have some framework of discipline. So this morning, for example, I'm PMSing, I'm getting my period in 3 days. I'm at, like, the peak of, like, feeling shitty and just hormonal and, like, tired, and I'm breaking out, being a woman, it's amazing. And I have started running again, and, I feel so good when I go for a run, and I think it's again, it's like everything is in the gray, there's no black and white, but it's like I didn't wanna get out of bed, I didn't wanna go for a run, so I was like I compromised with myself. I'm like, "Look, Allie, you're feeling shitty. You're gonna feel worse if you don't move your body today." And so I'm like, "Just go for 5 minutes." So I ended up running for 13 minutes. Like, was it my best workout ever? Of course not. But like, I'm so glad. I felt so accomplished and proud of myself at the end. And it doesn't mean that I hate my body. I wasn't running because I felt like I needed to burn calories. Like, it was from a place of love. And I think sometimes discipline can be, it's like a blurry line where, people feel like, oh, if you're too hard on yourself, it's like from a place of hate. But actually, it's, for me, it's from a place of love. And I think I'm so proud of myself when I push through, and it reverberates outside of like exercise, obviously. But that was just one example. So I can't speak to like, I don't know enough about the anti-diet movement, but I will say, like, I am someone who does thrive with some healthy discipline and like kind of reparenting myself in that way. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah,
that's,
no,
yeah.
no, for sure. And I think you've given our listeners so much just to really think about and a lot of inspiration to really help themselves maybe just get out of a funk that they're in. And I know that you are the owner of Oat House. I'll be sure to put your website in today's show notes so people can check you out and check out your Instagram and all that good stuff so they can connect with you if they want to check out your personal page as well.
Oh, good. Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I mean, I've just been through so much of this BS, with like food in my body. So if my experience can just help someone who's in the trenches right now, like that is my why.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have to have you back on, and you're always welcome. And thanks again
Mhm.
so much, Allie, for coming on today. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Bethany. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Digest This. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review in your podcast app to let us know. If you're ever wondering how you can support me and this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family is the best way. This is a Resonant Media production produced by Drake Peterson and edited by Mike Fry. To email the show, message us at digestthispod@gmail.com. See you next time. The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical and mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or health team first.